a nice sunny San Diego afternoon. I'm actually heading down to immigration court. I have a hearing this afternoon. So one of my clients is in removal proceedings, which means that he's facing deportation. The government is saying that he is removable essentially because he doesn't have status to be here. And so we are actually filing an application to request that he be allowed to stay here in the United States based on the fact that he's been here such a long time and he has family here, basically has some U.S. citizen children, and that if he's deported, those U.S. citizen children will suffer hardship. And so there is a form of relief available to people in that situation. So that's what we're applying for. So we'll be letting the judge know that he's applying for that, and then the judge will ask us to basically compile documents which support our request. So we need to show evidence that he's been living here for the past 10 years. We need to show how his children will suffer hardship if he's deported. We need to show evidence of his good moral character. We need to write a brief basically summing up all the evidence that we're submitting, and then in the end there will be what's called an individual hearing, which is kind of like a miniature trial, only there's no jury. It's just the applicant's attorney, if they're represented, and then the government's attorney, and then there's an immigration judge. And so after the presentation of the testimony, the judge will make a decision as to whether the person can stay in the United States. So you have to excuse the shakiness of this. I meant to record using my camera, but I forgot to put the memory card back in it, and so I'm just using my phone, and I have an outstretched hand, and so it's a little shaky. But nonetheless, this morning I actually went back to one of my favorite books. It's one of the classic, iconic self-help books, and that is Think and Grow Rich. And every time I go back to that book, I mean, I've probably either read it, read the actual physical book, or listened to the audiobook, at least or approaching 20 times. And they say a man never steps into the same river twice. The same is applicable to books. You're in a completely different space the next time you read a book. And so it can be, one line or another that just has a completely different, impact on you based on where you're at the time you read it. So I always remember the first time I read it, and it makes me laugh because the first time I read Think and Grow Rich, I was about 25 years old. I was about 25 years old. I was in between college and law school. I was working at a law firm as a file clerk, and I was on my way to go to law school at 25 years old. So in 2005, I knew that I was going to start law school in 2006. And in between, basically, my college graduation and law school, I worked to save up some money and, to get by. And I don't even remember how I came across Think and Grow Rich, but somehow I got my hands on it. And it's funny because when I read Think and Grow Rich, I was looking for basically a get-rich-quick scheme. I wanted to know how I could make money and how I could make it fast. I wasn't interested I've always been a hard worker, right? So I've always been a grinder, always been a hustler, but my mindset in looking at this book was that I just wanted, give me a ready-made, basically get-rich-quick scheme, because I wanted all the things that I thought were going to, bring me happiness. And that was, if I were rich and I, lived in this area and I made this kind of money and I drove this kind of car and, took these type of vacations, like I thought that was, that was the jam. I've since learned that that's not the case, but it's very interesting the way I see Think and Grow Rich and the way I interpret it these days, and the way I value it in a way that I did not at that age. But so like I said, yeah, I started to listen to the audiobook again, and man, it's such a powerful book. Like when you listen to the audiobook, like I'm a huge hip hop fan. I make that, pretty well known, especially if you follow me on Instagram. But when you listen to Think and Grow Rich, it's like bars after bar after bar after bar, and it's just these like one-liner truths that are classic. I mean, dating back to I believe Think and Grow Rich was written shortly after the Depression, which was in 1929, I believe. And interestingly enough, I mean, just the writing of the book is fascinating, because it talks about how a book like that would essentially be impossible to create in this day and age, because basically Napoleon Hill interviewed the titans of business of that day. I believe that he had access to Kodak camera, Firestone of what became to be Firestone tire, Edison, the Rockefeller family. The who's who of business back then, and this was all commissioned by Andrew Carnegie of Carnegie Steel, who basically was one of the richest men, or actually the richest man in the world at the time, I believe, based on his success in the steel industry. And so Andrew Carnegie basically had him, he was interested in common people understanding the principles of what it took to become successful and what it took to become rich. And so basically he had Napoleon Hill interview all these people and basically compile a list of the factors and principles that makes one successful and how one can think and grow rich. And so basically it comes down to the generation of wealth not necessarily being attributable to hard work and grind and labor, but rather thinking your way into wealth. And so what makes it really fascinating is that is such a simple concept, this idea of think and grow rich. And for me, it's interesting because I'm no longer in a place where I'm like looking for riches in the way I was when I was young, and especially not the trappings of success, the cars, the house, the backyard pools, luxury vacations, all that kind of stuff. I just not exactly interested in that stuff anymore. I'm more interested in creating a legacy, and I'm interested in being free, in being financially free. I'm interested in creating opportunities for other people. I'm interested in volunteering more. I'm interested in giving back more. Like all these different types of things are what I'm truly interested in. But I understand that in order for me to be able to help as many people as I want to be, or as I want to, I'll be able to do more with resources. And that just goes without saying. I think sometimes it's easy to bash wealthy people as greedy, as people that screw over other people and all these different types of things. But there are some wealthy people who do a lot of good things for a lot of people. And I received the gift of knowing what it feels like to give to others less fortunate than you a long time ago. And that's something that has never left me. Even though I grew up relatively impoverished, there were people who had it less, had it worse off than us. And my mom was really big on helping others. And so that's something that's always been near and dear to my heart. And I remember the amazing feeling of giving to others. I've been wrapped up in my own grind, trying to continue to promote my law firm and help all kinds of people and just the day-to-day grind as a lawyer. But I have my sights set towards being able to establish a foundation to help those in need in all these different philanthropic endeavors of mine. But again, as I was going through this book, I'm reminded of the common theme for me of this year being appreciation, gratitude, perspective, and persistence. And these are all lessons that actually come from or are touched upon in Think and Grow Rich. Without gratitude and appreciation, you can never truly be happy and content and fulfilled, because you're always looking towards that next thing. You're always looking towards the next thing, and you never appreciate where you are, who you have in your life, what you have in your life. And it's one of those things where they say, sometimes you got to stop and smell the roses. That's so true. And it can be as simple as, on a drive. Oftentimes I will look and I'll just appreciate the sky. Like right now, I can look out the window. Sometimes I'll just take my glasses off so I see it, more brightly, and be able to just appreciate the artwork of the sky. And I put things in perspective and appreciate where I am and, all the beautiful things in my life and all the wonderful people. That is so crucial to really living a content, fulfilled, and happy life. And I didn't always have that. I wasn't always appreciative. And then just perspective. I have these large goals and things in terms of what I want to do. There's, a bunch of ideas for new companies I want to start and establish. And if I'm not careful, I will lose perspective because I'm so caught up in wanting to do those other things that I don't realize that, hey, back in 2002, 16 years ago, while I was still in college, while I was just a junior in college, I had visions of having my own law firm and, employing my friends and family members and fraternity brothers as interns and as attorneys, as assistants, creating jobs, creating opportunities for people. And at this point, having these visions, I hadn't even stepped foot into law school. I hadn't stepped foot into law school, but that was my vision. And now, like I said, 16 years later, I'm living out those dreams. I'm living out those visions. And there wasn't necessarily anything per se to suggest that was a possibility. But it was a thought, and thoughts are things. That's another thing that is illustrated in Think and Grow Rich, is that when you have a thought, that is a thing. And that can be the seed if planted and tended to, watered and cared for. That seed can grow up into, a massive tree. It's just an analogy for what that thought can become in terms of what you can tangibly develop in your life. And so, man, I'm overwhelmed by that concept that I actually implemented what I had learned, whether, consciously at that point or subconsciously, that, wow, I have this vision, let me act upon that. And the way, you do it is you have this thought like, wow, I can do this, or I can become this, or I can have this. And then that thought that you have, you have to be able to tap into your why. Like, why do you want to do this? Because the why is where the desire comes from. And it's best that you have a why coming from a healthy space versus an unhealthy one, because if it's coming from an unhealthy ego-based space, then that, tends to not be a solid foundation. But when you have that why, and so you have this idea backed by and fueled by a desire that thing be carried out, you then form plans. You sit down and map out how you're going to go about doing this. You don't have to have all of the answers. You definitely do not have to have all the answers, but you begin to sort of skeleton outline what it is, what steps you're going to take to get there. So for me, that law firm, I knew, okay, well, I'm going to need to continue to do, pretty well in school, and then I'm going to have to take this LSAT, and then I'm going to go to law school. I'll graduate, pass the bar, I'll do some internships. That's going to lead to me, having the skills to then become a solid attorney, and then I'll form a practice, right? So, that's and that is an outline that would end up taking years to develop, but the why was strong enough. So my why was that I wanted to be able to help people. I wanted to be able to support myself and my future family. I wanted to have a profession that, was honorable and prestigious and something that, people could look up to. I wanted to be an asset and a resource to my community. I wanted to be able to give back. So many people did so many wonderful and amazing things for me in order for me to get to where I am today, and so I wanted to be one of those people who would contribute to the next generation. So those were some of my motivations. So you can see that's a really strong why. So when times got hard, when I felt like I wanted to give up, when I didn't know if I could take another step, my why is what compelled me to move forward. And persistence, that is another, there's a whole chapter dedicated to persistence. And I've been through trying times. I've been through the last couple of years have been trying years. They've been hard on me. They've been hard on me physically, mentally, and emotionally. I've been successful. I've certainly been successful, in any objective measurement of what you would deem to be success. But they have been hard years. But my why, my new why, my current why is strong enough to compel me to move forward versus giving up. And so those are such powerful lessons. So if you have never read Think and Grow Rich, I would highly advise you to do so. It is such an important life, just book for life. I think the title can be somewhat misleading because people can be sort of turned off by, rich, the idea of becoming rich. But, just a good book for planning out and mapping, designing and living a good life. It's a solid text. And so if you've read it before, what is your favorite lesson from Think and Grow Rich? What's your favorite chapter? I haven't even really thought about that, but it might be persistence. That the idea of continuing to move forward, to push forward when it doesn't look like things are gonna go right. When you have no indication that things are gonna go your way, but yet you keep pressing forward, you keep pushing. That's a solid lesson, and that's something. At this point, I've had my business, Kersey Law. It's been around almost 9 years, and I've persisted through some very tough and trying times, and I'm proud of that. And it's made me stronger. It's made me a better person, and it's given me confidence because I never gave up. I kept going. I kept pushing. And I know that someday, I'll reach my goals. But going back to the perspective, appreciation, and those type of things, I'm no longer so obsessed, because I will say that I was obsessed with reaching the goals, that I lose so much sight of the actual journey. So I'm more and more in love with the process, in love with the steps, in love with the journey than I am reaching a particular destination. And I think that's a very powerful lesson to learn as well. Well, I'm about to walk into court. Plan on doing a good job as always. So I'm gonna go to court, and then after that I actually have a therapy session, so I'm gonna have to do it from the car because I'm not gonna get back to I won't get back to San Diego in time in order to do it in person. So we're gonna do it over the phone. My therapy sessions are fire generally. They always make me a better person, so I'm certainly excited about that. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and until next time, we'll talk to you soon.